What if the thing that changes a child's life isn't a surgeon's steady hand or a miracle device, but a 180-pound cane Corso with an impossible instinct? The billionaire's son, Oliver Ashford, had been born into a world that looked like a movie set. Glass walls, quiet gardens, tutors who spoke in gentle tones, and technology that could predict weather patterns over his private island. But no amount of money could buy the one thing his father wanted most: sound for his son. Oliver couldn't hear. Not a little. Not sometimes. The kind of silence that turns birthdays into politely moving lips and fireworks into color without meaning. Doctors had tried everything they could responsibly offer. Hearing tests. Specialists flown in from 3 continents. The best possible hearing aids. Later, implants were discussed in careful medical language. Nothing had given Oliver a breakthrough that felt like hope. His father, Adrian Ashford, always stayed composed in public, camera-ready and calm, but the staff saw the truth in the quiet moments. How he lingered by Oliver's door at night, how he read to him anyway, how he signed "I love you" a little too slowly, as if the gesture could carry sound by itself. Then came Titan. Titan was not a trendy designer dog. He was a living fortress. Massive, disciplined, calm. A rare cane Corso with the kind of training usually reserved for elite protection units. Adrian initially brought him in for security. When you're that wealthy, safety becomes a constant equation. But Titan didn't behave like a simple guard dog. From the first day, he seemed to make a decision. Oliver was sitting on the floor of the family library, building a model airplane with quiet focus. Titan walked in, sniffed the air once, and then lay down beside him like a stone wall, choosing where to stand. Oliver looked at the dog's huge head, hesitated, and then rested a small hand on Titan's neck. The bond formed quickly. So quickly it unsettled the staff. Titan followed Oliver everywhere. He positioned himself between Oliver and strangers without ever growling. He slept outside Oliver's room. And whenever Oliver got overwhelmed, Titan would gently press his head against the boy's shoulder, grounding him in a way no human had been able to replicate. But the strangest thing was Titan's attention to Oliver's ears. Started subtly. Nudge. A careful sniff while Oliver watched cartoons with captions. A soft pawing gesture that looked almost like concern. The nanny mentioned it casually at dinner. Adrian smiled politely but made a note in his mind. Then one afternoon, Oliver was in the garden with Titan. The sun was low and soft, the kind of light that turns everything gold. Oliver was playing a game where he'd toss a large foam ball. Not far, just enough to make Titan do a short, happy charge. The dog brought it back, then stopped. Titan stared at Oliver's right ear. He moved closer, slow and intent. Oliver laughed, thinking the dog wanted affection. But Titan wasn't playful now. He was focused, like a search dog that had just caught a scent that mattered. He gently set a paw on Oliver's knee to steady him, then brought his nose to the ear again. And then Titan did something nobody expected. He let out a single sharp bark. Not aggressive, not panicked, but commanding. The kind of sound that makes adults turn their heads instantly. The staff rushed over. Adrian stepped out onto the terrace. Titan didn't back away. He looked at Adrian, then at Oliver's ear, then back at Adrian as if insisting, "Look." Adrian's heart kicked into a new rhythm. Because you don't ignore that kind of certainty in an animal that has never been wrong about danger. And for the first time in a long time, Adrian felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. A real, terrifying flicker of hope. Adrian crossed the terrace faster than anyone had seen him move in years. The staff formed a cautious half-circle around Oliver and Titan. The boy was calm, slightly confused, still smiling because to him this was just Titan being Titan. But the dog's posture was different now. No relaxed sprawl, no playful pant. He was still, alert, locked onto Oliver's right ear as if that small place held a secret everyone else had missed. "Oliver," Adrian signed gently, kneeling. "Does your ear hurt?" Oliver shrugged. He didn't look distressed. But when Adrian lightly touched the area behind the ear, Oliver flinched, just a little. The kind of reflex a child doesn't think to explain. That was enough. They went inside. The family's on-call physician arrived within minutes. In this house, time bent to money. But even the doctor was careful, methodical, calm in a way that suggested he'd learned never to promise too much. He checked Oliver's temperature. No fever. No outward signs of infection. Then he examined the ear canal with a small light. He paused. Adrian felt his stomach tighten. "What is it?" Adrian asked. "I'm not certain yet," the doctor replied. "But I do see an obstruction." The word obstruction landed like thunder. 4 years, the Ashfords had lived under the weight of complicated explanations. Neural pathways, genetic probabilities, the kind of medical language that sounded like a locked door. But obstruction sounded different. Sounded physical. Simple. Almost too simple. The doctor explained that sometimes, especially in children, there could be compacted wax, a foreign object, or a growth-like blockage that affects hearing. He emphasized that they needed to proceed safely, with proper tools. No guessing, no rushed attempts. Adrian nodded, but inside his mind was spinning. Could it really be something this basic? The specialist was called immediately. A pediatric ENT who had already seen Oliver before. Twice. When she arrived, she looked tired, skeptical, and deeply cautious. Because in her world, hope was an expensive emotion. "You gave it carefully." She reviewed Oliver's previous records and frowned. "We've ruled out so much," she said quietly. "But if there is a mechanical blockage we couldn't visualize before, that changes the conversation." Oliver sat in the examination chair with Titan at his feet. The dog was perfectly still, like he understood the stakes. The specialist leaned in with a more advanced otoscope. Seconds ticked by. Then her expression shifted. "Adrian," she said slowly, "I believe this is a foreign body, possibly embedded or adhered to the wax." Adrian blinked. A foreign body, as in something inside his ear? Yes. Something that shouldn't be there. The room fell quiet in that stunned way that happens when a lifetime problem suddenly looks like a single, solvable puzzle piece. The specialist explained the plan in gentle, precise terms. They would remove it carefully. No sudden pulling. No risk of damaging the ear canal or the eardrum. They might need mild sedation if Oliver became anxious. Everything would be done by the book. Oliver watched her mouth move, reading her calm face and her hands. Adrian signed the basics to him. "Doctor, help her." "Okay." Oliver nodded. Brave, trusting. The kind of courage that breaks your heart a little. What happened next was the moment that would later be told in whispered awe by staff and retold by Adrian in private interviews he never expected to give. Because the instant the specialist prepared her tools, Titan stood up. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply stepped closer to Oliver and placed his heavy head gently against the boy's knee, as if to say, "I'm here. You're safe." Oliver reached down and gripped Titan's collar with both hands. The specialist began. Slowly, carefully, she worked with fine instruments designed for tiny, delicate spaces. She eased around the obstruction. And then she stopped again, because what she was seeing didn't look like ordinary wax. "It's unusual," she murmured. Adrian felt that old fear rise, threatening to crush the new hope. "What do you mean unusual?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. She adjusted the angle, then tried a different tool. And finally, with one controlled, measured motion, she extracted a small, dark, irregular object. The room collectively exhaled. It was tiny. Shockingly tiny for something that might have stolen years of sound from a child's life. It looked like a hardened fragment, possibly from an old ear infection complication or something lodged long ago and sealed in place. The specialist placed it in a sterile tray. "That," she said softly, "could absolutely have impaired hearing on this side." Adrian's hands trembled. "But would that explain everything?" one nurse asked. The specialist hesitated. "Not everything. But it could explain far more than we realized." Oliver blinked, confused by the sudden shift in adult energy. Then the specialist did something that would make time feel like it had stopped. She snapped her fingers quietly near Oliver's right ear. Just a light, controlled sound, then repeated it near the left. Oliver's eyes moved. Not randomly. He turned to the right. The first sign. The first crack in the wall of silence. Adrian covered his mouth. He had prepared himself for 1,000 outcomes across 1,000 appointments. But he had never prepared for the possibility that Titan had just guided them to the simplest truth of all. And then Oliver did something that made everyone in that room freeze. He frowned slightly, as if startled by a sensation his brain hadn't felt in years. And he whispered a word, soft, uncertain, like testing a new language. "Dad." Adrian went utterly still. Because even if Oliver couldn't fully hear yet, that single sound from his son's mouth was the beginning of a life they had almost stopped believing in. The room didn't erupt into chaos. It didn't need to. It became something rarer. Quiet disbelief. Adrian barely breathed as Oliver stared at the specialist's face, then at Titan, then back at his father. The boy looked like someone waking up in a world that had always existed but never fully reached him. The specialist kept her voice calm. "We're not going to declare victory in one afternoon," she said. "But this is a meaningful step. We need follow-up tests immediately. We also need to check whether there's anything similar in the other ear, and confirm the condition of the eardrum." Adrian nodded quickly, the way people do when they're trying not to fall apart. Oliver was taken for a full audiology evaluation that same evening. When you're wealthy, the system speeds up, but the truth still takes its time. The tests were gentle and structured, designed to find real answers instead of emotional ones. Titan stayed close. Not in the room itself, protocol mattered, but right outside the door, planted like a guardian statue. And then came the first results. Oliver's right ear showed measurable improvement. Not perfectly normal hearing overnight, but a clear shift in responsiveness. The specialist explained that the brain can take time to recalibrate after prolonged reduced input, especially in a child. The signals might be clearer now, but Oliver would still need therapy and monitoring to maximize progress. For Adrian, it didn't matter that it wasn't a Hollywood instant transformation. It was real. It was medical. It was hope with a pulse. Over the next 2 weeks, the Ashford estate transformed in small, beautiful ways. Adrian began introducing sound in gentle rituals. Morning birdsong in the garden. Soft piano at breakfast. The rustle of leaves during evening walks. Sounds that other families took for granted, now offered like precious gifts. Oliver's reactions were subtle at first. Was a tilt of the head, a growing curiosity. Then one day, while sitting with Titan on the living room rug, Oliver heard something that made him laugh out loud. Titan sneezed. It was a huge, ridiculous sound for such a massive dog. Sharp, sudden, and almost comically undignified. Oliver burst into giggles. It wasn't just the laughter that stunned the staff. It was the timing. He'd heard it. He'd connected it. He'd responded in real time. Adrian excused himself to the hallway and quietly cried where no one could see him. But the story didn't end with one ear. Because the specialist, now reassessing everything, decided to take a closer look at Oliver's full history. The earlier scans, the earlier assumptions, the earlier conclusions that had carried so much weight. Her updated perspective was careful and humble. "Sometimes," she said, "when a case is complex, we focus on the bigger theories. A physical obstruction is so basic that it can get buried under the assumption that someone else would have noticed it." Adrian didn't blame anyone. Not really. He knew medicine was complicated. He knew his son's case had never been simple. But he also knew something else now. A dog had noticed what years of human certainty had missed. That realization didn't make him angry. It made him grateful in a way that changed him. The Ashfords didn't turn Titan into a viral spectacle. Adrian refused most interview requests. He didn't want this to become a circus. He wanted it to remain what it was, an intimate turning point in a child's life. But he did allow one quiet, controlled moment of recognition. A small ceremony in the garden. No cameras. Just the people who had watched this family carry a silent burden for years. Adrian knelt beside Titan, placed a hand on the dog's broad chest, and signed something simple for Oliver to mirror. Family. Oliver smiled and laid his small hand on Titan's head. Then, with the confidence of a child who suddenly had a new way to relate to the world, he spoke again, clearer this time. Good boy. It was 2 words. But in that moment it felt like a new era. Later, as therapy continued, Oliver began recognizing his father's voice. Not perfectly every day. Not without frustration. But with steady progress that made every setback worth enduring. And Titan became more than a protector. He became Oliver's anchor during appointments, his calm during sensory overload, his shadow during late-night fears. The dog who had once been brought in to guard a billionaire's home had done something far more valuable. He'd guarded a child's chance at a fuller life. By the end of that season, Adrian was seen walking the estate with Oliver in one hand and Titan on the other side. No entourage, no performance, just a father, a son, and a dog who had changed the future through instinct, loyalty, and a kind of quiet intelligence that money could never purchase. And if anyone ever asked Adrian what the greatest investment of his life had been, he didn't name a company. He didn't name a deal. He just looked at Oliver and smiled. Because sometimes the unexpected miracle isn't loud. Sometimes it weighs 180 pounds, walks on 4 paws, and refuses to give up on the truth.